So I'm Richard Purnell, one of the directors at the Mortgage Home. Yes, we are specialist buy-to-let mortgage brokers. What makes us sort of specialist? Well, it started because I'm a landlord myself. Sophie will also explain she's a portfolio landlord. So I've been a portfolio landlord for 25 years. Um, Bought and sold property on behalf of clients. I used to source properties back in the 90s and early 2000s. That was like an add-on actually to the brokerage business. So as well as building up my own portfolio. So we bought and sold about 40 properties over that time. For my own portfolio, we bought personal name as joint ventures. That includes people on the mortgage or not on the mortgage, where you just a guaranteed loan schemes, commercial mortgages, mortgages in limited companies, mortgages in pensions. That's my sort of personal background.
I've got to re-listen because you keep talking. I'm charging you.
If you can find those people, Sylvia, and just put them on anyone that's not muted, that'd be great if you could do. So that's the buy-to-let and landlord background. As a mortgage broker, set up the business in 1996. So I guess that makes it my 30th anniversary this year. And because of the landlord experience, we sort of morphed and really wanted to support and help landlords, particularly when it came to 2016, when, as you all know, unless you joined since then, the legislation really pivoted and became more complex at that point. Regulation really got more difficult, and lenders were told by the regulator to do considerably more due diligence on landlords at that point. So then we realized that there seemed to be a bit of a gap, a vacuum for landlords where they couldn't really go to many specialist brokers in the market who really understood how landlords were thinking, the challenges of landlords, etc. So hence, the Mortgage Home was born in 2017 to try and look after the needs of landlords. So bread and butter is essentially you guys. What do we do? And by definition, if I don't mention it, you'll know what we don't do. So you know what to come to us for. So yeah, we do residential mortgage. So for your first-time buyers and normal residential stuff, of course we do that. That is meat and drink for us, as well as obviously everything I said about landlords. And pretty much, if you want to make money out of a pile of bricks, then we'd be delighted to try and help with you. So whether that is bridging, whether that is development finance, whether that is pure buy-to-let, holiday let, service accommodation, HMO, multi-unit blocks. If you're looking to flip it, if you're looking to convert from commercial into residential and then either sell or indeed keep it for the long term, if you've got investment from foreigners, expats, all that sort of stuff is types of inquiries that we're used to doing. And all the insurances that might be linked to that, whether that's life insurance, income protection, if something comes left field and means you're not going to hit your property goals, do you want your legacy to be left intact? Do you want some insurance that can maybe clear those debts? Or if you can't work, do you want insurance that could maybe help you and make sure that you can keep those mortgages paid and keep heading sort of forward? So all the sort of insurance stuff we get involved in as well. Landlord's insurance, building insurance, rental guarantee, that sort of stuff. We are not IFAs. We don't get involved in investment advice. I am a chartered accountant by background. And I can see lots of questions that do go into tax. I'm not allowed to talk to you about tax. So if someone can pull me up, if my old habits get back in there and I start venturing into tax, I am not allowed to, but we'll try and sort of answer your questions as best we can. But please don't treat it as advice, as I'm not allowed to do that. Before I go on to the housekeeping stuff, Sophie, do you just want to quickly introduce yourself as my co-director?
Yes.
Sophie, just talk.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Sophie. So as Richard has said, co-director here at the Mortgage Home. Recognising quite a few names today, so that's always nice to see familiar faces. And for those that don't know, I've been obviously working alongside Richard and running the Mortgage Home since 2017. And prior to that, my background has always been in financial services. So I've worked for the likes of Skipton Building Society before becoming an advisor and going down that route, which is what we've stuck with. So as Richard has said, I'm also a portfolio landlord, so very, very similar in that it's not just the day job, the way we're interested in what's happening in the market and different ways of making money through property. It's what we're doing on an evening, on a weekend, and what we're doing personally. So I have a portfolio of holiday lets. And so, in terms of speaking to clients, absolutely we can help with the finance side of it and what that looks like from a mortgage point of view. But that knowledge that we've got external to that then just comes into play, and we obviously can put that knowledge into those conversations we're having with clients, whether that be, where to find the fluffiest towels or, the other side of it of best ways to find how to claim your small business rate relief and everything else that comes into play with being a landlord, whether that be standard buy-to-let, commercial, holiday lets, everything. So yeah, it really is a huge chunk of our lives. So really, really excited to get through these questions today. There's some really good stuff in there, like you've said,
Yep.
on there. So
Brilliant.
yeah,
Thanks,
I'm
Sophie.
excited.
So really, really briefly, just on a little bit of housekeeping, then we'll get straight into it. So we're going to be about an hour. We might have a little bit of flex to trip over that if needs be. No agenda, so it's all about your questions, of which we're absolutely blown away by what you got. So we'll get straight into them. If you want to ask a question yourself here, you didn't put it on the pre-registration thing. Two ways of doing that. One, just chuck it in the chat, and we'll pick that up as we go and try and answer it. Or stick your emoji hand up and we'll come to you if you want a particular ask it direct, because maybe it's got a little bit more complex and you don't want to be typing all day. Now, if it's something that's really niche, and frankly, you're the only one that needs to know the answer to this, and you're the only one that will benefit from it. I'm not saying it's not a great question, but the other 90 people on here are going to be getting a little bit bored pretty quickly. So we'll go offline with those questions. So please don't take it personally if I say great question, but we'll have a chat afterwards. Or Kate will, one of our admin guys, will put a link in the chat if she's not done already, and just book some time in if it's really that niche. Or what if it's really confidential or sensitive and you're a little concerned about sharing too much information in a public domain, because we are recording today, by the way. Then again, it might be better that you just click on the link and book some time with the team to talk it through. Yeah, so we are recording. So if anyone has to duck out really quickly, you can email us later, and we'll do our best to send a recording of the hour and a date for your diary. So grab your pens. Next one is 23rd of March. So midday, Monday, 23rd of March, 12 till 1. The very last thing I want to mention, and I swear we'll get into the questions after this, is that over the last 4 years, we've been doing a lot of financial educational content in the means of small videos on YouTube. So anything finance, anything mortgage related to do with any of the topics we're probably going to talk about today, you may find on our YouTube channel, The Mortgage Home, some useful videos on that topic. So again, we'll put a link in the chat. And you'll also get a heads up of future videos on there. If you do subscribe, then you'll just get a little tap on the shoulder the next time we sort of putting some content on there. So if you do value your education and you want to really top up on the financial side of things, then click on the link at some point after this session. Have a little browse around, see what videos. We've got about 200 on there covering a real wide range of subjects. It's completely free, so please jump on there and avail yourself. Right, okay, let's get on with what you are on here for today. So Brian Gill said, on completion of a full refurbishment of a terrace property, can you recommend any day one refinance companies? Now, for those that don't understand the relevance of day one, is that there's a general rule that buy-to-let lenders want you to have owned that property for 6 months before you can do a remortgage. So if the refurb only takes you 3 weeks, what those lenders are saying is you've got to wait another 5.5 months before you can knock on our door, apply to us for a remortgage, presumably at a higher value, and then you can pull out that extra equity, maybe some of the refurb costs, maybe even get all your money back out so you can go off and look for that next property. Sophie, do you want to talk a little bit about the day one lenders and how they work?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll talk a lot today about general rules, and just as a, I suppose, aside, there is always exceptions to those rules. So the general rule is, like Richard said, lenders will want you to wait 6 months. But as we know, there's so many different circumstances where you may need to refinance before those 6 months. So the rules there with lenders are that there are lots of lenders that we can approach in that scenario, but it is a smaller pool than the list of lenders you would get if it was after the 6 months. Now, the rules they have around that when you're refinancing day one, and what we mean by day one is it can literally be you bought it yesterday and we're refinancing today. However, a lot of lenders will want you to wait until the land registry is updated with you as the owners. So that obviously will have to be a little bit of time. And the other thing that they would tend to want to see is if you bought the property at below market value, and that might be that you've got yourself a deal on there and it was a genuine below market deal, that there was equity in there from day one, then a lot of lenders would either go on what the market value is or the original purchase price as the figure they're going to use in terms of lending against. So if you're expecting to pull the funds out of there that you've got in that property in terms of equity through a genuine discount, if you've not done any work to that property, it may be that as much as you can refinance on day one, you might want to wait that 6 months before going out to remortgage to try and release that equity in there. The exceptions to that rule is if you have done work to that property and you can evidence the work that you've done. So we're not just talking a lick of paint. It needs to be something either like full refurb or you've got new kitchen, new bathroom, etc. In that scenario, they will then fully revalue the property and look at what the market value is on that scenario.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sophie. I've just seen here there's a question very similar from Lee McGoldrick. I don't know if Lee's on, but he asks, how quickly could I move from bridging finance to term finance to recognize market value rather than the BMV purchase price? So I think it's the same answer. It's just that Lee has bought with bridging to start with, but it's exactly the same, Sophie, isn't it? There's nothing really to add. That those same lenders will pull you off bridging finance before the 6 months are up.
Same rules
within
apply.
certain parameters. Yeah. Wonderful. Okay. Next question. Fiona Black. She's thinking of buying a multi-unit freehold block, which Sophie might want to just explain what that is in a second, but don't know how the mortgages work for these.
Yeah, so multi-unit freehold block is essentially a property that is on one title and has multiple individual properties in there. So you usually see that in a scenario where you've got an old terraced house that's been converted to three separate apartments, for example. So they're freehold, they're all separate in terms of they've got their own utilities and they've got separate entrances, but they're all on the same title. So that is where it's essentially multiple units and they're all freehold and they're in a block. So
sometimes the services are not split, are they? That I've
not
I think
always,
you've come
no.
and that's a key thing.
Yeah.
That if they're on sub-meters on things like that, then
Yeah.
give us those real details about how the electric, how the gas, how the water is split to each unit, so we can talk to lenders and understand that that's acceptable.
Yeah. In terms of options with mortgages, there are lots of available products on multi-unit freehold blocks. Lenders that were happy to lend to buy-to-lets. There's again a smaller pool. Not everybody will lend to them. Of those lenders that lend on buy-to-lets that will lend to multi-units. And essentially, it works in a very similar way to a buy-to-let. So essentially, the rent that you're going to receive from from those properties determines how much you can borrow. They would value the property as a whole rather than each individual unit because it is one title. And they would just assess you as the owner or as the director if it's through a limited company, but the rent determines the borrowing. So they would take the rent from all separate sort of separate units within that block.
Now here's a tip. If you want to jot this down, particularly Fiona or anyone else thinking in a multi-unit blocks, this is how to squeeze extra value, extra profit, put money back in your pocket. If you want to really secure it as a multi-unit block, because you may be getting it at a discount right now, because there might be 3 units or so. We said might be 10 units. That the seller is trying to get rid of at one go, and you've got a real sort of good discount. But to get some extra value out, you buy it as a multi-unit block. But I've seen many landlords, then once they've acquired it, and they might want to do some renovations, refurb, whatever they need to do to the units, but then they create individual leases on every single unit and refinance them out as individual mortgages. And that usually, as a rule of thumb, adds straight away an extra 10% to the value of each individual unit. So to make an extra 10% profit, then you convert it from multi-unit to individual leases. And I do see property education companies selling this as a strategy. You've got it for free there. You got an extra 10, 15% if your multi-unit strategy is for you. Okay, moving on.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, go on,
Fiona, who asked that question, has just put a hand up to ask a question.
Oh, sorry, Fiona.
It's okay. So it's not a commercial mortgage. It's basically residential mortgage, but just because it's 1 unit.
Correct. Yeah, it's the same buy-to-let companies usually that you get any other buy-to-let mortgage from. They'll quite often have within their menu of products multi-unit mortgages.
Yeah.
But have a think about splitting into leases, whether that works for you or not, and then refinance them out on individual mortgages rather than one big multi-unit mortgage. I've seen landlords do that to generate some extra profit. Sally Hill. Hi, Sally. She's got a doer-upperer. I think we all know that phrase, don't we? Does it make financial sense to bridge first and then mortgage when the refurb is complete? I mean, that's a tough question. I think you've just got to be really, really confident with your numbers, haven't you? So I would call this a 2-stop strategy, and we're really happy to get involved in that. What we can't tell you, we can't be the decision maker whether it makes sense, but we can give you the numbers so that you can then do the maths to work out whether it does make sense. So we can give you the numbers for step 1. So I said 2-step strategy. Step 1 is obviously the bridging to buy it. Why would you be bridging? Well, it means that the property's not lettable at that point, and you can't get a normal, cheaper long-term finance on it. So you're going into bridging, and bridging companies don't care whether there's a hole in the roof, whether there might be some structural issues. Maybe you're going for planning permission change. Maybe you're going to convert the cellar into a habitable room, some sort of major change, which means you cannot let it the day you get the keys. That means you can't get a normal buy-to-let. So you might look at bridging. You might look at joint venture finance. If you've got deep pockets, you might buy it cash. That would be cheaper than bridging. Amazing, but who's got all the cash? So bridging comes in usually as a means of acquiring and securing that initial property. And let's say maybe you've also got it at a discount as well if there's a lot of work to do to it. So we can give you all the figures for the costs of the bridging and what it costs for every single month that you have that bridging in place. So then you can do the maths to say, right, by the time I've done the works, it might be 2 months, it might be 6 months. When I'm ready to refinance out of that, I'm assuming you're not going to sell, you're going to put it then into a long-term buy-to-let. So you've got all the bridging costs that you just add in to all your other costs of securing and buying that property. And then you need to understand, this is now step 2. What's the GDV? What's the gross domestic value of that property once all the works have done? What's the new uplifted value of that property? So then you say, okay, if it's worth X, we as a brokers will be saying, well, you should be able to get 75% of the value out, might be able to get 80% of the value out. And these are now the monthly payments and the costs associated with this long-term finance. And then you say, okay, well then, and what's the rent on it? So then you know what the yield is compared to the outgoings and what your return's going to be. How much of your initial capital is going to get reimbursed to you with that uplifting value? So you'll be able to work that one out. And you can then decide yourself what the rate of return is at that end product. So we can assist you with it. We can't make the decision for you. So it's a bit complicated, but I've done loads myself in the time, and we've helped many landlords with that two-step strategy approach. So I would actually book some time in if you've got a property in mind, because here's the thing. Do not buy the property and then come to us saying, oh, I think I need some bridging. I think I need, as a landlord did last week, he's already bought it at auction, actually, this one, and then came to us for the finance. This is what you should do. You do the planning first. And you, before you even go to the auction or put your offer in, we'll give you the step one bridging cost. We'll give you the step two long-term finance cost. Then you decide whether you chuck it in the bin or you put an offer in. So that, hopefully that's answered Sally's question. Manu Share, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, Manu Share. What's the forecast for mortgage rates? Let me get my crystal ball out. Easy one, this, isn't it? Look, it's been a fantastic year, 2025. We had those consecutive rate reductions in 2025, and we ended the year in December with an early Christmas present. So the base rate is 3.75. Now, of course, in January, inflation actually increased. If we saw the headlines, that sounds like a negative. But and the Bank of England, if you didn't know, the Bank of England's sole remit is to get inflation back to target, which is 2%. That's the role of the Bank of England. And it pretty much has one tool in its bag to be able to do that, and that's adjusting interest rates up or down to manage inflation. In reality, they don't care about you and I and what mortgage rates we pay in. It's almost a byproduct of that. So with inflation increasing, you might think, well, the Bank of England are going to sit on their hands, or what if they even put rates up? But actually, the Bank of England were expecting this. Back in November, and particularly with the budget, the knock-on effect of Rachel Reeves, some of her changes means that inflation was going to blip right now. So it's not been a major surprise. And I understand that the forecast is still that inflation should drop towards its 2% target towards the end of the year. So in terms of trajectory, I'm fairly confident on that side. The other thing that we look at here is swap rates. Won't get into that today because we're short of time. But we look at where swap rates are going, and the direction of travel is still generally downwards. And if the markets, the city was spooked by anything that Donald Trump or whatever is happening in Davos, Greenland, or wherever else, means that the risk to lenders of lending out is increasing, you might not see it in the Bank of England because they only meet every 6 weeks, whereas the swap rate changes happening every minute, every hour, every day. So you get a real-time understanding of what the markets are thinking compared to the Bank of England, which is every 6 weeks. And swap rates are still looking and holding really, really low. So would I expect rates to drop at the next meeting in Feb? If I was a betting man, I'd probably say they'll sit on their hands for a little bit. And maybe the April meeting, we might see another drop. All things, as far as we can see right through at the end of the year, I would anticipate right now a couple of drops in rates between now and to the end of the year. If we had rose-tinted glasses on, we might even say 3 drops. Beyond that, even if everything's looking great, I don't see the Bank of England dropping rates any more than 0.5 or 0.75%, because that is the 25-year average that has been then hit. And unless there's some issue that we had after the financial crash of 2008, where the Bank of England dropped rates pretty much to zero, then I don't see rates dropping much further. So this year, you're going to see the best rates you've seen for a long, long time, is the short answer on that one. So I hope that's answered your question. Sophie, maybe you can answer this one. So Ivan asks about drawdown facilities. So you might need to give our definition of what a drawdown facility is. Yeah. Is there any lenders doing drawdown facilities where you can use the equity in your property as a type of current account? So we might need to talk about flexible mortgages here.
Yeah, absolutely. So the only way that this is sort of possible is under a particular type of product that some lenders offer, and they're called offset accounts. Now, the way they work is you have your mortgage with the lender, and linked to that is that you have a current account with that same lender. So the funds that you've got in that savings account are offset against the mortgage that you owe on your property. So if you've got £100,000 mortgage that you owe and you've got £20,000 in your savings, you're only paying interest on the £80,000 of that mortgage that you owe. So that is the only way that you could take a product that will allow you to use those funds against your property as essentially like a drawdown sort of way of working it. There's no sort of revolving credit as such in terms of a product where you can apply for a certain amount against the equity in your property and then use it, pay it back, keep going back and forwards. It would be more from an offset point of view. Now, an offset mortgage are quite popular on residentials. There's a few different lenders that would have that option available to you on the offset side. But when it comes to buy-to-lets, there is only actually one lender that is offering an offset mortgage on a buy-to-let basis. So as you can see, it is a lot less popular on the buy-to-let side. So if that is something that you would like to know more about or consider and understand a little bit more how they work, then yeah, just let me know. But that's how we would see it working as a drawdown facility in that respect.
Great, thanks, Sophie. Okay, moving on. James Stockwin asks, what are the current market rates for buying in a limited company? We have to be really generic, obviously, here, and there's a huge caveat that every personal circumstances, as you'd expect, are individual. So it's going to be really sort of broad brush. Sophie, do you want to? You're closer to the coalface than I am. Do you want to answer that one?
It is a really hard question to answer is this, and I don't think that it's actually going to be that beneficial for me to say. They could start with a 2, which is amazing. There are some rates now that are out there that start with a 2.
Surely that's too good to be true.
Well, I know it is. You may think so. It is not a lie. There are rates out there at the minute that start with a 2.
Where's the catch, Sophie? Come on.
The catch is that they come usually with a whacking great fee, and the mortgage lenders now that are offering rates have got such a variation of rates. They'll say, "Great news, we've got this 2.7% whatever with a 5% arrangement fee typically."
Or higher.
Or higher. We've seen 7s and 8s, haven't we?
Yeah.
And then you've got the flip side of that where, if we're actually looking at what is probably more of an average rate at the minute, you're probably looking mid-4s. So a lot of lenders moved away from these flat fee products where you would find a rate with a 999 fee or a 1495 fee, whatever. And now we tend to see that it's the rate with a percentage-based fee. Which then makes it really difficult to say what a typical rate is because it ultimately will depend on your circumstances, how much you're borrowing. And the one good thing to take from this is that there's some great low rates out there. So in terms of cash flow, if you're saying, well, do you know what? I don't actually care about that fee. That's amazing. In terms of my cash flow, it's going to work really well for me. I can take more money out of my property each month because the rent's going to be really strong on there. Happy days. The other way it's going to really benefit people is one of these rules that came into play back in 2016 when the rules changed around to how lenders were to view portfolio landlords was that they had to assess the rent in a certain way in terms of making sure that it's not just coming in and covering its face. They have an actual stress rate. And what I mean by that is they have a calculation in the background that they use to work out how much your rent needs to be in order to borrow a certain amount. Now, there's a few different things that change this, but typically it is based on the rate that they're going to offer you. So if they were like we saw 18 months ago, rates starting at 7 point whatever percent and higher, your rent's got to be really, really strong on there. And if it isn't, then your borrowing reduces. So we saw in a lot of cases that people might have even wanted to try and pull money out. That wasn't possible. And in some cases, they couldn't even borrow the amount they needed to cover their existing mortgage. That can still be the case if people have not been managing their rents properly in terms of annually increasing those rents, or you've had a friend in there, they've lived there 10 years, been a great tenant, you've looked after them, but you've never put their rent up. That's amazing, what a fabulous landlord you are. However, you then come to speak to us and want to borrow the money, and the rent always determines that borrowing. And so now we're seeing these lovely low rates. You can see that the rent doesn't need to be as strong as it would do if the rates were at 5, 6, 7, 8%. So there's absolutely time and a place for these low rates if you're wanting that cash flow, or if you need your rent to really work hard for you in terms of the borrowing. But it might be that I can shout all day about a 2 point something% rate, but you come to me and when I send you the research, I offer you a 4.5%, because we will always work out what's most cost effective or whatever's best suited to your needs, depend on that conversation we have.
Thanks, Sophie. Great thorough answer on that one. Just a quick reminder, obviously we've got loads of questions that are pre-written anyway, and that'll take us all hour. But look, if you guys have got any burning questions and you've just joined, the process is chuck your question on the chat if you want us to ask it today, or put your emoji hand up and we'll just then ask you to unmute so you can ask your question. But other than that, we will keep going and hopefully getting a lot of benefit out of it. Tamila Thomas. Am I right in thinking that if you are a limited company, you can still deduct the full cost of the mortgage, and I think she means mortgage interest, from the profits before tax? So Tamila, I've got to be careful, as I said earlier, not to be seen as being an accountant. I am not an accountant today, right? Remember that. Don't sue me, particularly Tamila. But yes is the answer. 100% of the mortgage interest is deductible when it's in a limited company, compared to in a personal name, where in particular if you're a higher rate tax, then it's restricted, which is why since 2016 limited company purchases have incrementally become more popular. At the end of 2025, this is nationally, this data, 60% of every purchase is done in a limited company. It's now the dominant form or mechanism or structure for buying properties. Now, a couple of things here. One, that's fantastic news, because finally the high street guys are getting wind of this, and their market share is shrinking on the personal buy-to-let purchases, because until about 2 years ago, not one single high street bank or building society would do a limited company buy-to-let purchase. They didn't care. They stuck their nose up at it. Weren't interested. Guess what? Now it's the dominant. Banks and building societies are starting to come into that market, which will increase competition and obviously bring rates down. That's brilliant news for us landlords. And that's one premonition for this year, I expect more banks and building societies to join the party and offer more limited company buy-to-let deals. One little heads up, you might want to write this down. If you are thinking of buying in a limited company and you've never set up a limited company before, please do not let your accountant set the limited company up first and then come to us as the broker. It needs to be a three-way conversation. It's sadly too often we've had landlords come to us already with a limited company set up, and they've made it rather complex because the accountant is only bothered about tax saving. So he or she might advise you to set up a limited company structure that is extremely complex, has shareholders on that are kids, the grandkids, the cousins, the nephews, you name it, they're all on there, because we can get dividends out to all these people and we can save tax, and the accountant thinks they're being really clever, but then the lender says, I ain't lending on that. What's the point? You're going to throw it in the bin. So please, if you're thinking of setting up a limited company, talk to us at the same time as your accountant, and we come to a pragmatic solution that balances the tax saving, but that you're not going to be penalised in terms of getting mortgage deals. That's my one top tip on that.
To add on that, can I just add to that as well? We work with an amazing accountant. We've worked with them for a long, long time. They're our personal accountants, and they look after a lot of our clients. And we particularly work with them because they are clued up with property tax. So it's not just any old accountant. They understand the implication of setting up a really complex limited company, because they know when it lands on our desk that we're going to tell them to redo it if it's not right. So they know the ins and outs of property, how it affects mortgages, properties when you're applying. And so if anybody wants their details, please put your hand up or send us a message, and we will share
just
them
put it in
out.
the chat. Yeah, just stick
We'll
it in
pop
the
it in
chat.
the chat, yeah.
And we'll pick it up, and then we'll just introduce you after.
We'll introduce you. Yeah, they're amazing, the bits in Leeds. And somebody has also asked if we know of anybody solicitor-wise that would be able to help. We can help with that as well. So we'll send over any details of anybody wanting introductions, because we've
that's a good point,
built
isn't
up a
it?
team. We've built up a really solid team around us over the years.
Listen, and I get you as landlords. You know, if you come via property education companies, in particular, building your expert team around you is a key thing to do. And if you've still got some gaps and you think we can signpost you, then again, chuck it in the chat. It could be surveyors, architects, accountants, solicitors, capital allowances surveyors, which quite obviously niche.
Property
if there is anyone, just shout if we can help and just point you in the right way, we will do. Now, Ankit Agarwal asks and this links back to the last tax question. If you've already got houses on personal, in other words, you've got buy-to-let properties that you bought in your personal name, is it beneficial to transfer them to a limited company? Now, that is 100% an accountant question. However, what I can say is a couple of points on this. So if anyone's listening today and that owns property already in personal name, and in particular, if you're high rate taxpayers, you know that you're getting absolutely hammered for tax. And if those properties were only in a limited company, you know that would be more tax efficient. But how the hell do you get those properties from where you are now into a limited company? Don't I just transfer them? Well, no, what the law says is that actually you've got to sell them to your limited company. The limited company buys them. And of course, what does that come with? Loads and loads of transaction costs. So if you're going to sell, then you might have capital gains costs to pay. If your limited company is buying, they've got stamp duty to pay. And then you've got all the solicitor's costs in selling and buying. So usually it's quite prohibitive. But here's the second option. There is something called incorporation, which I think what Ankit is referring to. And it was tested out about 10 to 15 years ago by someone called Ramsay, Ramsay. So Ramsay were a husband and wife landlord that wanted to move their buy-to-let properties from their personal name into a limited company. And the HMRC says, you can't do that. You've got to sell it and they've got to buy it. And they said, no, we want to challenge that. We want to use something called incorporation, which has been a well-trodden path with other assets historically. And the Ramsays were saying, we want to do it with our buy-to-lets. So it went as a test case. So if you're interested in it, look up Ramsay case incorporation. I think if you Google that, you'll get enough detail. And what
Ramsay versus HMRC.
Even and that will tell you some of the key tests that the Ramsays had to hoops to jump through. So that's the sort of hoops you'd need to jump through to be able to be eligible potentially to move it, and then you are transferring it. So you then sidestep all those transaction costs I've just said, and it goes into your limited company. It's now in a tax efficient wrapper, and away you go. So again, I ain't going any further than that. Because I'll get into trouble, but talk to your property tax accountant. If you don't have one, have a word and we'll signpost you the right direction. Wow. Isaac says, is it the right time to buy? Yes. Oh, the right time to buy was 25 years ago, obviously. The second right time to buy is today. Honestly, I mean, it sounds flippant, but here's the thing. I swore I wouldn't mention Liz Truss ever again. I'm sorry. I gotta mention her. When she came out with that ridiculous budget with Kwasi Kwarteng, and the world went to hell in a handcart, mortgage rates went from here up to here pretty much overnight. They went up to about 6 or 7%. But look, these are rents. Rents can't double straight away. So it's taken 2, 3, 4 years for rents to incrementally go up and up to get to parity. And we got to that, I believe, this is me as a landlord and also seeing my clients and their portfolios, we got to parity last year, finally. But then in addition, mortgage rates started to drop. So now finally we've got deals that are making profits, and we've got existing portfolios that are now looking healthy again. So from that point of view, I think it's a fantastic time to buy. Yeah, right, let's move on. Okay, Hayden Brown, are mortgage rates going up or down at the moment? I think we've sort of answered that. The trajectory is down. And every time the Bank of England rate has been reducing rates, because swap rates have also been going down, in other words, the markets feel confident in that direction of travel, then that saving has been passed on by the lenders. And I don't see that changing right now. So, yeah, I expect rates to go down. 5-year rates are now, generally speaking, slightly more expensive than 2-year fixed. We've not seen that for a lot of years. And finally, I would call normal services resume, where 2-year deals are slightly cheaper than 5 years. But if you want something related to you, you got to click on the link, have a look in the chat, and make a personal appointment about your circumstances. Nira Wijena. Oh, I'm sorry, Nira. I might not be pronouncing your surname correctly here. So she's asking, can someone do a serviced accommodation on a buy-to-let mortgage property? Sophie, if you can come in on that one, because she's saying, are serviced accommodation mortgages higher than a standard buy-to-let mortgage? So I think that's a good question.
Yeah, good question. So we get this a lot. So serviced accommodation is essentially where you've got a property, but you're not going to let it to just one tenant that pays a monthly rent. It's somebody that is in there that is paying per night to stay. So it's not always a holiday let. So there is actually 2 types of serviced accommodation in terms of a lender's eyes. Now, I'll very briefly go through the difference. So a holiday let mortgage is recognised by a lender that it is in a typical holiday let area, so Cornwall, Devon, the Lake District, somewhere near the beach, the seaside, somewhere where you would like to go on holiday. So that is, again, the same thing. You've got different people in, and they're going to pay per night to stay there. Serviced accommodation typically is a property that is in a less likely area that you would want to spend your summer holidays there. So we see this a lot in city centres, or it might be actually that it's just in a really great part of a town that happens to be near a lot of commercial units, or somewhere where you're actually going to get like contractors in, people that are there all week working, and they're going to go home at the weekend with the family. So you're not getting holiday makers there, but they're still paying per night to stay in your property. So that is how we would class serviced accommodation. So in answer to this question, if you've got a buy-to-let mortgage on a property, again, very generic answer, but the answer is probably no, you cannot use it as serviced accommodation or holiday let. You'd be in breach of their terms and conditions. They would expect there to be a tenant in there on a short hold tenancy that is paying per month to be in that property. So if you're going to decide to let out a property in your portfolio as a service accommodation or as a holiday, I think it's going to do well as that, and it's going to generate more income. That's great, but you will need to look at remortgaging onto a product that allows you to do that. In answer to the next part of that question, are serviced accommodation mortgages higher than buy-to-lets? Yes, they are, very slightly. The reason for that is not every lender will lend to a serviced accommodation or a holiday let. So the fewer lenders we've got, then the less competition, the rates are slightly higher. It may be that there's slightly higher fees. And the other main distinct difference that we see between a holiday let and a serviced accommodation, just to keep on this track, because I've seen a few other questions about this, is not every lender that will lend to buy-to-lets will lend to holiday lets. But then we've got a section that will. Not every lender that will lend to holiday lets will lend to serviced accommodation. It is a smaller pool of lenders. And the difference between those lenders in terms of how they're going to assess that mortgage is typically around the income that they will allow you to use to work out how much you can borrow. So where we've talked about previously, the rent that you will generate on a buy-to-let determines the borrowing. On a holiday let, they will take the income you're going to generate as a holiday let. So what do you charge for the week in a mid-season, low season, high season? They take an average of that. That's typically a lot higher than you would see as a standard buy-to-let, and that then determines the borrowing. On serviced accommodation, there's a little chunk of lenders that say, well, we don't mind. We know it's not Cornwall. We understand that you're going to let it per night. We don't mind. You don't have to have a full-time tenant in there, it's paying per month. But to protect ourselves and you, and to just make sure it all still fits, we're going to use the rental income as though you are letting it out on a standard AST. So standard family let, buy to let. So you might say, well, hang on a second, I'm going to get £3,000 a month on service accommodation. I've got all these contractors coming in every week. They're paying 150 quid a night. They'll say, well, we understand that and that's fine, but we're still going to use 695 that you'd get as a standard buy to let. So be making sure that when you're speaking to any broker, when you're explaining that you're buying a holiday let or a service accommodation, that a broker that deals with it a lot should be asking you, where is it? What type of people? Is it holiday makers? Who are your sort of target market in terms of clients that are going to be staying there? Because it will absolutely determine what figures we use to work out the borrowing and which lenders we approach.
Thanks, Sophie. Jeff, you got your hand up, my friend?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Just an add-on to that question. That's why I put my hand up. So similar question, but just imagine if you were taking a buy-to-let mortgage, but then renting the rooms out separately, not in the HMO, above 6 people in a house, below. Is that still for a buy-to-let mortgage?
Good question.
Can you still do that on a buy-to-let mortgage? Is that still the correct?
Yeah, so a lot of lenders will determine whether or not they class it as a HMO based on whether you've got
Mm.
separate tenancies or not. So that's probably the key part to this.
So
If
you would
you've
have to
just
have
got
you'd have to have separate people, but all on the same sort of
tenancy,
agreement.
yes, if you've got
That's
how you get around it.
three friends or four friends that say, yeah, we'll all live together. So they're not related, but they're all happy to go on one tenancy, then they'd be okay with that. The
What
likelihood
if,
of that happening is slim.
yeah, what if, that's what I was going to say. What if they're not friends and you still have to do
If they're
that?
not
Is
friends
that
and you
still
rent it per
possible?
room, it'd be classed as
Do
a
you have to just
HMO.
ask the tenants if they're happy to do that before you?
Yeah, if someone's going to prepared to lead that, it usually is with some students, for example, if they're all coming in together. We do see it, but it tends to be restricted to a maximum of 4. Because I think when it goes to
Yeah,
5, I don't know if there's a licensing
yeah,
requirement
I'm
as
trying to
well.
keep it below
So it
4.
gets it below the 5 and on one tenancy, then bog standard buy-to-let rates we usually can get them.
One extra question then. So if I was to do that way, I would then have to, every time a new tenant moved in, I'd need to issue a new contract to all of them, essentially.
No, I think
If
it's
one
that you'd
left and
have
one,
one person that would manage it, but it's asking that
like
person to
a
essentially
lead.
be, yeah, like a lead tenant who would then, if for example somebody moved out, she could or he could be then responsible for finding a new tenant, or they'd be responsible for that rent. So it is a big ask, but ultimately, if you're going to have the separate tenancies, you'd be on HMO products.
It's just, it's just because of the Renters' Rights Act changing
Yeah,
things. I was just trying to look for a new sort of way of doing things to
yeah,
keep it like a periodic, but still maybe another thing what I was trying to do is try, get a contract where we could charge them per night, but still billing them per month kind of thing, if that makes sense. Don't know if that is possible.
I think if it gets into what we do find a lot, if you're looking
Yeah.
to produce a type of tenancy or lease agreement that's slightly left field, for example, Jeff,
Mm.
is send us a draft of it.
yeah.
And particularly if we've got some lenders that, if we're going to potentially doing some refinance for you, then we can get some feedback as to whether these are likely to be acceptable and maybe tweaking it so that you're ahead of the game. So maybe email or set some time up with the team and just talk through in a bit more detail about some sort of scenarios that you're considering. Like you say, we're going to periodics anyway. ASTs will be a thing of the past in the next 3 months. So we're all having to learn how lenders are going to react to periodics and any variations of that might come. So if you've got any ideas and we can sound a few lenders out and give you some feedback, we'll do that.
Yeah, no, it's just another one which will really benefit everyone is I was on a property course this weekend and they were sort of running through that there will be all of these changes. So if you guys come across when they do a template, if you could get that out to everyone, that would be
Ah,
very
right.
helpful. Because
For a
then
periodic tenancy.
someone will come out with a template which shows all of the new things which needs to be in there. So it'll be very easy for us if you guys find that, just
Yeah, I
share
mean,
it
if
with
we
us.
do, yeah, if we do come across them, I'm surprised that property education. Which one was it, Jeff?
Yeah, I don't really want to say because
Oh, sorry. Okay, no, not a problem. Apologies. Um, yeah, I mean, whether maybe they might be the first people to put their hands on it, but yeah, if
yeah,
we will come across them at some point, we
they
might not be the
mentioned that
first. That's the only thing.
the mortgage people should or brokers should get it, get the first to
Yeah,
know of
we
it.
will
So
as we get towards 1st of May, certainly. Yeah, thanks for
yeah,
that.
thank you for all the time.
Yeah, welcome. Cheers, Jeff. Yeah, we've got to move on.
Sorry, can we very quickly just answer a question around tenancies? There's more question here that I think links to what
Yeah,
we've just been talking
quick one
about.
then. Yeah.
In order, somebody's just asking about commercial tenancies and having like social housing. Anything that is not a standard tenancy, as we know as a short hold tenancy. I know we're moving away from it, but any commercial tenancies, leases, things like that, it can be done. There's just particular lenders the way we approach. Very again, general rule is anything up to a 5-year tenancy on a commercial is okay. Above that, they get nervous. So if you're unsure, like we said before, send us over a copy and we can help you with that.
Thanks, Sophie. Josh Curry asks a question about share purchases. He's starting to hear more about them, but hasn't got in under the surface. So what are share purchases when we're talking about buy-to-lets, and how does it work? Genuinely, I think this is going to be the most exciting thing for landlords for 2026. So if you are looking actively to build your portfolio up and accelerate that, please take some notes now, because this is, I swear that this is so game changing for us as landlords. I've not seen anything like this for years, and I don't say that lightly. And I'll explain why. First of all, I'm going to explain what share purchases are and then why I think it's game changing. So usually if we buy in a buy-to-let property, we might be buying one, maybe two at a time, and we buy in the physical property. And that might be in personal name, or we're going to put it into our limited company, our SPV, if you've heard that acronym before, special purpose vehicle. It's just a fancy name for a limited company. However, where we've got landlords that are looking to retire and they own their properties already within a limited company. So that's the key point. The seller already owns these properties in his or her own limited company. So there might be 5, there might be 10, whatever. Instead of buying the properties out of that limited company and putting them into yours, which comes with all the usual transaction costs and the second home stamp duties, you buy the shares in that company off the seller. Now, here's the thing. The stamp duty is now no longer the usual stamp duty rates plus the extra second home stamp duty rate added on top, which is eye-watering, as we all know. It's 0.5%. The second thing is you're accelerating your property journey. So if you have got a property plan to get from 1 property to 20 properties over the next X years, you're going to go at a certain pace. But if there's an opportunity to buy 20 properties at one go, and I know you're ahead of me, you're going to say, where the hell's the deposit coming from? Hold that thought. Then you're going to, if you can acquire the shares, you've got 20 properties at one go. Now, what I have seen over years when working with landlords that are buying multiple properties off a seller is that there's very, very few buyers. So the one thing I see regular is significant discounts from the seller, because there's not many people want to buy 10, 20, 30, 40 properties at one time. Now, if you've got 25% deposit to put in as cash, now bear in mind this could be a multi-million-pound portfolio, then happy days. Crack on. It's not complex. These sorts of deals have been around for a while. This is the game changer. And this is what I want you to write down if this interests you. What we are advising our clients as one permutation is that if the landlord has got 25%, the current owner's got the 25% discount that he's going to let you have. Let's assume that that's the case. And the owner currently is prepared to retain 5% minority shareholding in that company, but he's going to sell 95% to you on day one. So that has got to be part of the negotiation. Then we can get you 95% of the value of those discounted shares. So if they're worth £2 million and you've got a 25% discount, so you're getting them for 1.5, then we can get you 75% of the 95%. This is why you need to write it down. So it might be about 1.4 million that we can get. The discount is almost seen as the deposit. So your cash down is actually, from a deposit point of view, is zero. From a deposit point of view, you've now not having to put any deposit in on a multi-million pound portfolio acquisition. So long as you can get a 25% discount from the vendor, and the vendor says, I'm happy to leave 5% in there, but you're giving him or her 95% of his 1.5 million straight away. So hopefully he or she's happy. And he's got to keep that 5% for 5 years. After 5 years, you refinance and you pay him or her that 5% out, and they go on their merry way, and you are now a 100% owner of a portfolio. Sounds a little too good to be true. Here's one caveat I think about it. If you're listening to this and go, wow, I've not even started my property journey, so I can get 20 properties on day one. No. No, the lender's going to say, oh, hold on a minute, we need to walk before we run. But if you're looking like you're going up the gears and you've already got some experience behind you, we've got one client at the moment who is doing exactly this and owns probably 10 properties, but he's buying 60. So that's going up the gears. He's going from 10 to he'll own 70 in total. It's an £8 million valuation. He's getting it for 6. You don't believe me? You go out there and you look for these guys yourself. He's getting it for 6 million. So we've been able to get finance for about 5.8. And the other 200k is the other 5% that's staying in there. Is there other costs? Of course there is. It's a huge transaction. There are lots of other legal costs, solicitors' costs, accountants' costs that you've got to bear in mind. So you're not going in with no money in your pocket, but there's no deposit. So I'm not going to spend any more on this, but I'm telling you, this is going to be the biggest thing that's happened to landlords in 2026. If you can accelerate your property journey with no cash deposit. If you want to know more about that, then book a link in and just put in the notes, share purchase. I want to know a little bit more about it, and we'll be happy to expand on that later today. We're running short of time. We're on 1 o'clock, so we've time for maybe a couple more. Sophie, could you answer this one? Alan Twine says, we are a family limited company with 4 directors, husband, wife, son and daughter. Is it a disadvantage to have 4 directors?
No, in short, you are allowed up to 4 is typically fine with lenders. There is always going to be permutations of that, so lenders are always going to have different criteria. But again, general rule, they'll allow up to 4 directors on a limited company. With you saying it's a family limited company, so obviously you've got a father, wife, son and daughter. If son and daughter are on there as directors or shareholders and they are under the age of 18, that is when you're going to come across issues, because essentially as a director and sometimes as a shareholder, depending on how much shares they've got in the company, they would have to become the applicants of that mortgage, which they can if they're only 6 and 7. So if you're unsure, let me know. The other thing you can do is drop your email in or have a conversation with us. We've got a big fact sheet on how best to set up limited companies, the different SIC codes, the shareholding, everything you need to know, and we're happy to share all that with you. If anybody's interested in that, please let us know and we can send it out.
Listen, I'm really mindful of time. We're just over 1 o'clock. Tara, I can see your hand up, so we'll come to you in a second. If there's anyone else who's got a real burning question, stick your hand up now because we're about to sort of wrap it up. And I've got another 60 questions from those that pre-registered. So listen, apologies. Maybe we'll try and figure out whether we can answer those and do some generic emails out. We're obviously doing the next Q&A in March anyway, but if anyone has not had their question read out, please just book some time in. That's the simple answer. It doesn't cost you anything, half an hour of your time, and we'll answer those questions. Tara, finish on a good one.
You operate in the Republic of Ireland?
Hi, Tara. Nice to meet you.
How are you? Do you operate in the Republic of Ireland, or have you any Republic of Ireland customers?
Yes, we have Republic of Ireland. So you'd be seen as a foreign investor. Don't take that personally. So if you invest in on the mainland over here, then yes, we do have lenders on our panel that deal with foreign investors, and I guess you'd be treated as such. But yes, there's appetite to lend to you guys, but the devil's in the detail because there's not many lenders. So I would book some time in so we understand your circumstances and make sure that you tick all the boxes as well. Sophie, anything you want to add to that really briefly?
Sorry, I think Tara wants to add to that.
Sorry, Tara.
You don't lend for properties in Ireland?
Oh, sorry. If that was your question, then no. The property itself has got to be in the UK. So my apologies if I was misleading you there a little, but no, if you buy in the UK, come on, Tara, the grass is greener on the other side, even though we're talking about Ireland, which
that goes for
quite makes sense, doesn't it? The Emerald Isle
as well. We deal with a lot of expats as well, so anybody that is outside of the UK, if their property is in the UK, we can arrange lending and finance on that.
So I'm going to state one more question.
Saying they want the recording of this session, so it is being recorded. We'll send it out afterwards. We have covered a lot, and I think for anybody that's joined late or just like the share purge and stuff is blown
really quickly. Put your name and email on the chat. We're not sending it to everyone because it's a manual process, and we would have to do it 100 times, and we're not doing that. So if you specifically want one, please put your name in the chat, and then we'll work our way through that list as we go.
One last question if you wanting to do one. So somebody has asked in the chat, can they borrow against an unencumbered rental property that they have in their personal name in order to secure lending for purchasing property in their limited company, i.e. cross collateral lending, or is it best to take out a mortgage? So in short, the best, and in terms of giving you the most amount of options, would be to take a mortgage out on the unencumbered property. Those funds then come to you personally. You can then put them into the limited company to use as your deposit. The cross collateral, it's more of a commercial side of thing. You just massively reduce the amount of lenders that you'd be able to approach to do it that way.
And it all goes as a director's loan, doesn't it? So when you're pulling the profits out, you're repaying your director's loan if you put a couple $100,000, so you're not paying tax on it until that, I'm becoming an accountant again. Damn. Stop. Then you don't pay tax on it, allegedly. Right, one more question, then we'll have to wrap it up. This is about adverse credit, which we've not had any, up to this point. So Kamal Gurung, my credit report, if I'm going to share it because you put it on here, Kamal. 630, 3 defaults in March 2022, 1 default in March 2024. Well, it says, any ideas for cheaper mortgages? Obviously, Kamal, you're going to have to come on and tell us your situation, but let's just widen it. Can we get buy-to-let mortgages for people with adverse credit? Let's answer that one.
That was it. Yes, we can.
Succinct. There we go. Amazing.
There you go. End of the day. No, we can. There's so many options. There's so many lenders. Sometimes they want to know the background. Usually, when we see things like this, there's a reason why. There might have been a life event. It might be that you've moved address and the car parking ticket got sent to your old one. We see so much of this. It's so common, and there are lots of options out there. So anybody that wants to have a look at what we can do in terms of their personal circumstances, please just let us know, and we can see how we can help.
We're going to have to wrap it up there. Thank you so much to everybody for your time today.
Yeah.
Pardon?
We could be here all day. There's so many good questions.
We could. Just as a really brief reminder, we have our Mortgage Home, the Mortgage Home YouTube channel. We've got about 200 educational videos on there, all finance related. So there's a link in the chat. Just click on that. And if you subscribe, then every time we put some content on there, then you'll just be reminded of that. That'll be amazing if you do that. Other than that, thank you for your time today. Enjoy the rest of your day. And as you said, we've got the link to our diary, online diary, so that you can have a proper chat on a more confidential basis, and we'd be happy to help. Other than that, thanks so much for your time and have a great day. Cheers, everybody. See you on the next Q&A. 23rd of March.